welcome back to the Shock Absorber podcast, and fantastic as always to have you along with us, and fantastic to have two lovely gentlemen here. We won't say lovely again because we did that on the last podcast, didn't we? But Tim, how are you?
Fantastic.
Fantastic, great. Joey, you just as fantastic?
Just as fantastic.
Mr. Fantastic.
Ooh.
Mr. and no, I was going to say Mr. and Mrs. Fantastic. That doesn't work. We have two fantastic people on the lounge.
My Johnny Storm or
Oh, is that from...
the Fantastic Four?
Oh, I don't even know the names of the Fantastic Four.
Oh, there's Mr. Fantastic.
Which one's he? Is he
Mrs.
just...
Fantastic.
Oh, is it? Oh,
What's her name? Sue Storm.
okay.
Johnny Storm, their brother and sister.
Oh.
And then Ben,
Yes.
Ben.
last name, I can't remember, but the Thing. He's the
Oh,
rock,
that's
he's
the
the rock
Thing.
monster.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yep.
How's the rock monster just become a character in a...
Well, it makes a great cartoon character.
Yeah, but how does he just join that team?
Well, no. It's
I don't
all
know the
because-
origin story.
Oh, it's been done like 3 times really badly. So they go up in space and become exposed to some sort of space radiation.
Oh.
And that's how they all get their different abilities.
So
So
is-
Mr. Fantastic can stretch
Yes.
and Sue Storm can become invisible. And she also has some weird kinesthetic power. Like she can call it force field kind of
Okay,
thing.
yeah.
And Johnny Storm can fly and catch things on fire. And the Thing becomes a rock monster.
But
Ben.
is the Thing related to the other storms?
He's a friend. He's best friend
That's what I
with
don't
Reed
understand.
Richards. Reed Richards is married to Sue, and Ben is his best friend, and Johnny is Sue's brother. And it's like a family. The whole thing is about family. That's the
Right.
core of the comics, is that they're a family, and so it explores different themes about family and what it means to have family you can choose, family you know married into, like all those kind of themes
Okay.
come up in the comics.
An unintentional related cultural artifact. We weren't even planning to talk about
Oh,
that.
good on it.
Well
Yeah.
done.
It's fantastic.
The one that we were going to talk about, and just before we get into finishing our mini-series on the practice of, we call them community groups, other people call them life groups, home groups,
Connect groups,
connect groups,
growth groups,
growth groups,
Life groups.
life groups.
life groups. Yeah. Life.
Group is often a common word, though.
Yes.
Yes. And usually, how much is a group? Between 5 and 20?
Yeah, any less than 5, it's
It's a dinner party.
lackluster.
It's not much
Not
of a
that it's
group.
not important and can not do discipleship well, but it's
I feel like that's how you describe a group. Anyway.
We had, sorry.
Go.
I was going to say, actually, I think maybe last week, 2 weeks ago, we had like a massive amount of our guys go on holidays. It just so happened. They didn't plan it, but they all went on holidays.
Holidays.
We ended up having a group of 4, actually.
Hmm?
Still a group, guys.
There it is.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
When
we enjoyed it.
we planted our group 2 years ago, it was just the 4 of us, and we sat in the room in Paul and Day's lounge room, and we prayed that the lounge room would soon be full, and now it is.
It is.
It is. We've got 11 in our group now. That is not including any of the kids that might turn up.
Awesome.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it is actually full. We're running out of space.
Well, before we hit how you actually do
Got a
your
plant.
community
Yeah.
group, which is what we're going to talk about today, is like how are you actually doing it on the ground is really what we're going to talk about. A cultural artifact that I suggested
Yes.
was a book that I finished recently. And if you're a regular listener to this podcast, I enjoy football, the real football, soccer, as we often call it in Australia. And I read this book, which I've been wanting to read for a very long time, by Joe Gorman, who is a journalist it's called The Death and Life of Australian Soccer. And the reason I wanted to read it was because for a long, long time, football has been called the sleeping giant of the Australian sporting landscape. And I'd been wanting to figure out why is it still the sleeping giant, because I've played it since I was 5, and I've probably played it up until I was about 34, and I coach my son, and I love it. I've coached adult teams. It's a big part of my life. I'm a Liverpool supporter. And I think part of the reason is that I never was able to really get into the A-League as much as I thought I should be into the A-League. And I was trying to figure out why that is. Plus, Australian football is the most played team sport in Australia by far, like by any stretch of the imagination. The only one that comes close is netball in terms of how many people play it. And that's usually more women play that, and that number is actually transferring to football as well. So it's one of the fastest growing games for women as well.
So Joel,
yes,
what brought life to Australian football and ultimately its death?
that sounds. Well, see, is it dead? That's the other question.
Is it dead? Is it dead?
But it does. The book does a really good job of. I was looking for answers, and it didn't give me any answers. It just made things far more nuanced and more complicated for me. Whereas I'm trying to look for answers. I think the answer is the answer is nuanced, and I think the book helps with that. But the bedrock or foundation of Australian football is the ethnic groups that migrated to Australia from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then created their own kind of meeting places where it was kind of often it was a social club that they would go to on a weekend after the working week, and then they would often have a football club attached to that. And so it grew from there. So there was a community, and people would contribute to it in terms of volunteerism, money. They would increase the size of their stadiums, et cetera, et cetera. You could create a club. It'd be a lot harder to create a club now than it was back then. But as an example, Ange Postecoglou, who used to be the coach of the Socceroos, is now coaching at Tottenham Hotspur. Was very successful. Just had a very successful period at Celtic in Scotland. Not as successful at Tottenham right now. And his story is he grew up at South Melbourne, which is a highly influenced by the Greek community there. And he was born in Australia, but he was born in Greece, but moved out very early with his dad. And his dad was really sad that he'd moved away. So he had his own business in Greece, and then he moved to Melbourne and had worked himself to death. He didn't die because of it, but just worked all the time. The only time Ange got to spend with his dad was when they went to South Melbourne Football Club on a Sunday and watched them play. And he was around the Greek community, and then they're all talking about football. And so there's this connection for Ange of that back to his family history. And as a result, that's the story of a lot of clubs in Australia. But then it traces the fact that this whole thing of how does it broaden its appeal? I mean, a real boom period was like the end of the 50s and the 60s, they think, was when it really grew those clubs. But then you get to the 70s and 80s where they're like, we're not getting the same growth that we want to represent. It talks about the themes of multiculturalism and even mentions the White Australia policy and things that are part of Australia's history. And how does that actually translate? Can we translate that to a broader appeal that perhaps AFL, cricket and rugby league, rugby union had in Australia? And that's the kind of story it traces of why it talks about the life and death, because it has this up and down thing of Australia doesn't have that linear trajectory continually upwards in terms of football. It's up, it is a peak, and then it's down. So one of the biggest peaks, you would say, was the start of the A-League, which got rid of the whole ethnic thing on purpose. And I'm trying to understand whether that was the best move or not for Australian football. But that coincided with Australia qualifying in November 2005 for the 2006 World Cup. So the first time we'd qualified for a World Cup since 1974. I was at that game, which was amazing. And our reasonable success at the 2006 World Cup with probably the best generation of players we'd ever had. And so that seemed as a real peak time for Australian football, I would suggest. And then after that, we bid for the World Cup. Only got one vote in the entire voting process. And I just wonder what kind of mirror it holds up to Australian culture, as well as that whether we accept football as a mainstream sport or not. I think it is, in a sense, partly if it's the national team, but it isn't if it's at the domestic game. So, yeah, I've got more questions than answers after reading the book, and I think that's why I'm frustrated. I might sound frustrated about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought of some connections with church.
Ooh,
we'll get to that, and I'll get to that in a sec. But my question, from your experience and also from reading this book, you were saying just before we started recording, it's one of the highest youth activities in terms of attendance.
And not just youth.
So
You mean in terms of playing
playing,
football? Yeah,
like-
it's the most played sport across all age groups.
All right. Okay. So the most played sport. So there is something going on where in Australian culture, it is it's very Australian to play soccer at a club level.
Yeah.
And so and you also mentioned that where we are in the Sutherland Shire is one of the largest football associations.
It is
suburban associations
in the Southern Hemisphere.
In the Southern Hemisphere. Okay. So I mean, we're very familiar with winter weekends is just chock-a-block with soccer and netball.
Yep.
And like traffic around the Shire slows down at 20 kilometres per hour for the entire Saturday.
Saturday mornings,
as everyone's crawling around and circling fields and trying to find parks and bouncing between games. And there's so many games that we've now got whole leagues that play on Sundays as well. So you've got all of that. And yet, as you're noticing, that as we think about what are the sports that we are fans of in terms of attendance and watching, soccer comes nowhere near it.
Yeah,
like you can't fill a stadium by doing a Sydney FC game. But you have a rugby league game, and you can get most of the stadium full. Like and people watching on TV. It's the AFL grand final and the NRL grand final are two of the biggest TV events and cultural events in the calendar.
And their TV rights as well. Yep.
And the TV rights. Yep. Does the book help explain that disconnect?
No, and I think that's why I'm a bit like, I don't know where to go from here, because now I thought this would, like I said, I thought it would provide answers. I think what it's saying is no one has yet been able to exactly work out how to take that foundational part of football, which was the ethnic groups, and translate that into an appeal possibly for what is termed an Australian audience.
Yeah.
I think there's something to do with Australian culture that we only, when you support a football club, and this is why I haven't, I think, found an A-League club that really appealed to me, is because it's part of your identity when you become a football supporter, in my opinion. And I don't know if it's as much like that with rugby league and AFL. It could be AFL. I think AFL is more vociferous support than rugby league, in my observation. And I think that partly could be why they get bigger crowds at AFL games compared to rugby league.
Right.
But interestingly, the NRL TV rights deal is larger than the AFL's.
Yeah, I feel like so we'll play soccer on the weekend. So Saturday morning we're playing soccer. Saturday night we're watching league.
Yes, I think so.
And that, as you say, it's an interesting that when we have. I mean, I don't even know if you can watch. Can you watch A-League games on TV?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you need it's a.
No, it's on. It's on Channel 10 now.
Okay, right.
Used to be on Foxtel, and that was a big part of the A-League, and possibly part of the disenfranchisement with it is they put from the beginning they put it all on Foxtel.
Yeah, right.
And it was all on pay TV rights.
Yep.
Which works for some sports and doesn't work for other sports, and I think.
Well, you need a fan base first.
Yes.
So, because if you're a fan, then you will pay a premium to watch the thing you're interested in. But you have to be all in.
Yep.
But do that. For someone who is casual, and it's like you can watch the games for the low price of $29.99 a month on your Foxtel subscription. It's kind of like, I don't care that much.
I mean, I think more rugby league games have moved to pay TV now too, though.
But they're taking a fan base with them.
True. That's very true. Or at least an audience. And I think there is a difference there. Is it a fan base or is it an audience? Because
interesting.
I think rugby league works, out of all those sports, rugby league is the best TV product because it's usually a small portion of the field that it's focused on. So when you watch it. And I think part of the disconnect also is that we often, I know sport is a huge part of Australian culture and has been for a long time. But sometimes I think we want to see it as entertainment and not something that we belong to. And I think, and as I said, when you choose a club for football, and this is my opinion, you belong to that club. And I think...
And that feels like it's got some of this heritage in it.
I think so.
So that it's, you're connecting because, as you said, the ethnic connections. So because my family is Croatian, it makes sense to be part of this, and because I'm reinforcing not just my interest in sport, I'm reinforcing my cultural heritage
and a connection to the homeland.
by doing this, and sport becomes just one of the things that we're expressing. This is my connection with church in a sec. So it's very hard, and you said this just before we started recording, Joey, like as someone who's coming in and coming from an Asian background but interested in soccer, they're going, okay, well, what team do I support?
Yeah.
You want to say more about that?
Where was that? I think it was just a question as we were chatting, Joe, about some of the roots, the grassroots of football in Australia. Just going, I guess it would be interesting just seeing, we're still trying to figure out what kind of solution there is. But yeah, what it would be like to have, other ethnicities, other people who love football but may not be part of those kind of grassroots kind of teams, but go, well, yeah, how do we, participate, get involved? Can that become part of their identity in terms of, a club they belong to? Yeah. It'd be interesting. So I remember growing up, actually, I grew up playing football as well, played for the Ryde Panthers.
That's a cool name.
Back in the day. yeah. But I remember, my coach back then and his sons were in the team. They were from, I think they were from Serbia, as in that kind of background. Yeah, I think they're Serbian. And they'd come over. And, we're around the schools in the same area. And yeah, it was really fun to kind of be part of their team. I was one of a few kind of Asian kids on the team, but loved playing, hang out with them. Yeah. But it'd be interesting,
I think that is one of my favourite things about football is it's one of the easiest games to connect with so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And
it's the world game.
Well, it is. Yeah, that's part of it. It is the world game. And I think that happens on a slightly local level. Like I've heard about, there's an African football tournament that happens in Western Sydney. Oh. So people from African countries get together and make it their own. Yeah. But there seems to be a disconnect from there up until the broader level, I think. And I think it's also a picture of migration patterns changing. Obviously, the 50s, 60s, 70s was very much European countries that people came from to Australia, but now it's very much shifted towards Asian. Yeah. But having said that, football's huge in all the Asian continents as well. Across the Asian continent as well. Yeah. There's only one Asian continent. And then, like I said, even for me, it was hard. I really have struggled with the A-League because it's not just the quality, it's the ability to form a connection with a club, which they did on purpose the book calls it de-ethnicise the league. And that has been a discussion since the 60s of we need to de-ethnicize it so we can appeal to more people. But as a result, you totally disregard that foundational part of the game in order to try and appeal to a different group. So those people that have contributed so much have just been disenfranchised. Yeah. And then, like I said, that A-League team, it looked like the A-League was going to be amazing because it came off the back of the Socceroos or just before the Socceroos and making it to the World Cup. But I think that's the biggest thing is that it should be, how do you, where I'm at now is we should be involving the past and respect it and show that they have contributed. So as an example, NSL, like National Soccer League records, don't count towards A-League records. That's a perfect example of it. It shows that what you did back in the NSL isn't worth it. Whereas if you've got someone like Damien Murray, who came from a Balkan background, was by far the top scorer in the NSL for Perth Glory. Interesting though, Perth Glory was one of the most successful clubs that didn't have an ethnic background. So they wanted to use that as Perth Glory and Brisbane were the two that were created without an ethnic community as the beginning, as the model for it. But again, it was the whole thing of like, we're disregarding what you've contributed to the game for a long time. And that's the reason I think the A-League has worked with, to some degree, families and younger people, we should say. But the older generation, like, not going. I remember speaking to someone who, her dad was Italian, and he was like, I'm not going to any A-League games. He used to go to, I can't remember if it was Marconi or another Italian club in Sydney, and he's like, I'm not going. Oh, Apia Leichhardt is who he used to support. And then he's like, I'm not going to any A-League games, no way.
Yeah.
And then when Alessandro Del Piero came out to Australia to play in the A-League, he was like, I might go to a game. So an interesting, it's that connection to the homeland too thing, which I think is really important. Anyway, what's your connection, Tim, to church? Because I love this.
So one of the, as you were talking about the way that these football clubs formed, and you're talking about how it's the community that forms who happen to play football, not let's play football, and I guess around it, if we've got time, we'll do a little bit of community. And I think that's a really insightful way of what has been so strong about those clubs has been it's the idea of the community based on identity that happens to play football. So football is just one of the things that they do as they gather together as community to reinforce their identity. And I think about that in the way that we actually gather for church. So the typical expression of Western suburban church is you have an hour service, and if you can stick around afterwards for a coffee and a biscuit, great. But the thing that we're doing is the service, and the community is a nice side benefit if you can participate. And I think one of the things we've been trying to do at Soul Revival is to say, let's make the community, like, we're getting together because we have identity in Jesus and identity with each other as friends because of Jesus. One of the things that we will happen to do because we think it's important is to have a gathering and have a service. So yes, we have an hour service where we sing and we pray and we read and we have the sermon. So we do that, but it's not that and community if you want to. It's community who happens to, at some of their time together, do a formal service.
So it's expression of community.
Yeah, well, yes. So it's it's an important part. It's not unimportant. It's a key thing that we are doing, but it's as the community, who we are, our identity has been shaped by Jesus. And so we intentionally put all of these things around it. We spend a lot of time hanging out with each other. We do meals every week. We're finding time during the weeks, and talking about midweek stuff in this series. Because that's who we are. So, and which also means that every time we come and we spend time in community, we're reinforcing that identity as well. And one of the interesting things because the Christian gospel is not ethnic, it's cross ethnic lines. And so we don't have this confusion of, I guess, I'm German, but the only clubs here are Serbian, and do the Serbians want me as a fan, or do the Croatians want me as a fan? What's that going to? We don't have that. The gospel is open to everyone, and there is also strong identity in Christ that we find because of who we are and what Christ has done for us. So it is reinforcing our identity when we gather, and one of those things that we will choose to do together as we gather is to do a formal service. So I think that kind of rang out to me as you were speaking.
It's interesting you say that, because my first reaction was, football is open to everyone. that was what I was thinking of. Well, football is open to everyone, but we're going to form these separate identities as well. And the disconnection is between, we have a football identity or our ethnic football identity, and it's the crossing over those two things is where it's hard. But if we compare that to being a Christian, that's already been done for us. I think that's where I was excited when you said that. Is that yes, football is for everyone, but we've still got to we're arguing over this thing. How do we figure it out? But it's like, we don't have to. Jesus done it.
Yeah.
And Jesus won the unity already.
And maybe A-League is the ideal, because in the A-League it doesn't matter where you come from. You can come and you can join the Sydney FC. You can be a fan regardless of your heritage.
I think I just don't have this connection with Sydney FC though. That's why I struggle. And that's when Western Sydney Wanderers came into the A-League. I was like, ooh, maybe. I feel like that's where the team should have been. Anyway, we'll leave that out. Let's talk about like actual practice.
Yes.
Because as we said, practice is like what we're doing on the ground. If we have a strong theology and a really clear strategy, we think that our practice can be really flexible and we can stick to those two higher level things, but allow it to be flexible and do it in different ways in practice. So my first question was going to be, what do you actually do for your community group? What day is it? What time is it? How does it actually work? Do you want to go first, Joey? And then we'll come around back the circle and I'll finish off.
Yeah. I think I might have mentioned it last week, but good to kind of refresh it. We, particularly at our Ride campus, we have 2 groups running at the moment. Both of them are on Tuesday nights. Mm-hmm. So we just actually planted one beginning this year, which is fantastic. And they run, I guess, the same kind of structure. We aim to have dinner together. So it's kind of starting at 6:30, 7:30 we have dinner, just kind of hang out. Really eases in people to just catch up over the week. And one thing that we've, because we could when we started as one community group, that we've been trying to continue is after dinner, because we have kids at both of those community groups, we kind of do a little kind of kids Bible time, but really we say it's for kids, but also for big kids.
I love it.
We all get to spend some time in God's Word. And we've been really enjoying that. I don't think that's every community group at Soul Revival Church, but at Ride we've been enjoying that. Just the little opportunities that have come up from it. Like, so when we started, it was the parents or just kind of reading the Bible with the kids. But over time, we got some of the uncles and aunties to kind of see if they wanted to read. And they just get to be part of sharing God's Word with our kids, with my kids. And that was really lovely.
I think I'm going to pinch this idea.
It's just so cool. I think like everyone just gets into it a bit. And, some other people, they get to see, oh, this is what it's like, just even family life. We've had dinner together. Kids are a little rowdy. They want to do other stuff. But, we're going to just spend a little moment just around God's Word. And they get to see a bit of the chaos. But some of the times when the kids are just like, we're not doing this. And the parents just going, man, this is really hard. But they get to see all of that. And I think that's a nice moment in community group. And then after that, for us, we try and put the kids to bed. And then we have kind of after that time prayer and then time in God's Word, which is the passage usually coming off the sermon from that week.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think like I said, might pinch that idea and get people in my group to read stories to my kids before they go to sleep. I think that might be a really good one. But before I talk about my group, Tim, your group, you're Tuesday night too as well.
We are Tuesday night, yes, 7 o'clock, 7 till 9:30 is kind of our time. And so we get to the Terry's place. They have always cooked us a beautiful dinner.
That's so good.
Which is lovely. So we really enjoy eating together. People will kind of rock up sometime in that sort of half hour between 7 and 7:30, and it's pretty casual start. But we'll eat together, usually clearing up somewhere between 8, 8:15. Paul makes some coffees for us, which is great. It's great.
That guy makes good coffee.
He takes his coffee very seriously.
Any drink. He makes really nice cocktails too.
Oh, okay. There you go. And yeah, so by 8:15, 8:30, we're sitting in the lounge room, opening up the Bible. And again, we will look at the passage from usually the sermon the previous week. And between myself, Paul and Day, we sort of rotate who kind of leads the conversation. And we've all got different ways of thinking about how to lead. And so even that in terms of practice. So Day will have looked through the book, the material that has been provided. Sometimes, as I said last week, we write it ourselves. Sometimes we're buying other material. At the moment, we're using Matthias Media resource, which is great. And so she'll kind of go through that, work out key questions. Paul sometimes goes down rabbit holes. He has something in his mind that he's really excited about, so he wants to explore that, and so he'll take us on a journey and think about particular themes that are coming out and things that he's curious about. And I'm usually don't spend a lot of time preparing, but I've often preached on the service, so we just kind of open it up. And one of the things I try and do in terms of leadership is just, what are you guys curious about? What do you find interesting? Let's throw it around and ask questions. And I need, one of the things I want to do better is help ask questions that I don't know the answer to, because sometimes my problem is that it becomes let's ask Tim what this means. And I don't want to do that. It's part of what we talked about with Berea, the de-emphasising the expert. I actually want us to feel as a group that we can be curious about the Bible, we can ask questions, and it's okay if no one knows the answer. We do have 3 guys in our group who have all studied at Moore College. So there's a lot of answers around. But then also a wide variety of people with other levels of biblical literacy and history with understanding the Bible. And so, sometimes the questions might be relatively simple, like in terms of like can we just go back to like what's going on with
what
this?
Does this mean?
Like, what does this mean? Where is this place? Who is this person? Those kinds of things. And sometimes they're big themes. And also the other thing is I want to think about the so what. Like I want to try and get to a application.
Yeah. So what does this mean for us?
Yeah. And I think again, because it's community group, like we want to be sharing with each other. And so we don't call them Bible studies, where you could, the outcome is, I understand this Bible passage better. I'm thinking with an end of our theology, and our strategy is, how do we grow as disciples together? Like, it's actually the togetherness is really key, and the community is really key. And so, we'll kind of do that. So I'm always trying to drive towards a so what, so we can think about how do we help each other with that. Something else I've done with that is played around with this last year, redone it this year, is at the start of the year, one of our first meetings together is we go read through a number of passages in the New Testament that talk about either fruits of the Spirit or characteristics of a disciple or what it looks like to live a Christian life. And I get everyone to think about just one characteristic that they're particularly thinking of, and to be praying specifically for that during the year. And so we write that down, or I write that down, and then we can try to hold each other accountable. So if someone said, just patience is just something that I just really want to think about and pray about, and for Jesus to grow in me this year. And so we will be praying particularly for patience for that person, and checking in on them, but also listening to when they talk about their week. Okay, I can see patience coming out here. I can see this, those kind of things. So we've kind of tried that, just sort of have a characteristic of virtue, I suppose, like of, you can just say, I just want to grow as a disciple, and that's good. But if we can be more specific, it's not that that's the only thing I need to grow in, but it helps focus. So that's another sort of practical thing that I've tried to introduce, try to help think about as well. So that's been really fruitful, I think. And one of the things I did the last week we got together at the end of last year was I went through those lists and sort of was able to affirm everyone and just sort of say, nice. Here's what I've seen. We were praying this for you. This is what I've noticed. We've seen this, and this is what I've noticed. And so we were able to sort of celebrate the fact that God has grown us as disciples over a year. And a number of people fed back and said that was really helpful, because you named, just by naming it and making it very specific, it saves it from being just, I guess it's another year being a Christian. I don't know if anything happened. It's like, actually, let's...
Because we're called to grow, aren't we?
Well, we are, And I think what this showed is we are growing.
Yeah.
But by naming it and noticing it, it drew our attention to it. And I think that was really helpful as well. So that's something that we do in our practice.
2 good ideas that I might pinch from you too. That's really good.
And we pray for each other.
Oh, good.
So that's the last thing we do.
The question I got from you, Joey, that is, who usually leads your studies? I don't think we talked about that.
Oh, yes. One group, it's myself and I guess Weng as well.
Is that at your place, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's currently at my place. And I guess alongside that, intermittently, so Mary, I guess we work together on that as well. And then at the other community group is at Grace and Michelle's place. And so Ian and Grace kind of co-lead that one.
Grace
together.
and Michelle's place, where the ride gathering began.
Where it began.
That's really cool. For our one, we meet on a Monday night, usually 7:30 to 9:30, but often there's some hanging out time after that. We used to do dinner. When we actually took over that community group, we moved into a house of people at our church who moved to Orange. So we were renting it off them. And so we took over their community group because we weren't really leading one at the time. And that was really good because I find it really great that both my wife and I can be in the group and still have the kid. Obviously, someone's looking after the kids. So I find that it is a really good thing to have, just because it feels like we're leading it together. And so we actually moved to another house literally across the road and then we've been there. So we've had this group for probably 7 to 8 years, I think now. And it's gone through lots of changes. But recently, at the end of last year, we gained a whole lot of the young crew who'd been coming up and kind of just begun uni. So they finished school and just begun uni.
Yeah.
And we had to do that because Ethan, who's been on this podcast before, his leadership team were coming up into his group, so he couldn't just fit everyone in. So it's been really exciting to have these young guys come along, and I feel like we are really, really intergenerational now, because I think we've got, well, if we count my children, we can go from 4, but if we count the people who usually spend a lot of time in the study, it's from 17 up until mid-50s, I think, which is, if not a bit older, which has been really, really great. And the only real kind of part we're missing in between that is kind of the 40 to 50-year-old range, which is really awesome. I think the older people are a little bit unsure about a whole lot of young, loud, and sometimes brash 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming in. But it's been fantastic. It's like been a breath of new life into the group, which has been awesome. And they're asking, and some of them are newer Christians, some of them have been Christians for a while, but they ask really great questions, which has been fantastic for me leading it. So I lead it every week, and sometimes I'm able to prepare, sometimes I'm not, just because of time. But we used to do the dinner, as I said, and that was really cool, but it was just logistically and stuff. It just couldn't, it eventually fizzled out just because of money and time and things like that. So we just do, really just everyone arrives at 7:30. We hang out for 45 minutes, usually like hear about what's gone on in people's week or something that's silly or funny, and then we get into the study like you guys. I do like these 2 ideas though, that the kids' Bible time, I think I need to implement that. I think that would be really cool. And the idea of having a virtue or an idea that you're working towards, I think we might need to do that as well. I think that's really, really awesome. And that's the point of why we're sharing the practice, is that maybe people listening or watching would go, oh, that's actually a really cool idea. I've got a question I'm kind of grappling with in terms of, we say with practice that we're on discipleship, and discipleship together to be missional to others, basically. I'm curious, and I want to see how you think about this, is that I loved how, Tim, you said you would, like, we're really discipling each other. We are really growing, and that's part of the reason you pick those ideas and virtues to work towards, because it shows that you are growing. You can affirm that. And I really like that idea of putting in a bit of a structural way of doing it, because then you can see it over time. But I do think that helps us be on mission as well, because you are growing as a Christian. But I want to get your perspective, Joey, if you go first. Like, how does being in a community group, small group, however we want to call it, and discipling one another, growing together, how does that help us be missional as well?
Oh, there's so many different ways. I guess going back to the Colossians verse that
we started
mentioned,
started the whole
theology bit was those who've received Christ Jesus as Lord. Paul encourages the Colossians to continue walking in Him, rooted and built up in Him, established in the faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. And so as we gather together, say in community groups, the midweek on Tuesday, even something as simple, as sharing in each other's lives about what's been happening, what God has been teaching them, kind of the challenges, the difficulties, and walking alongside one another in that, and helping each other to keep seeing how, even in that discipleship moment of the virtues, the patience, the love, the faithfulness, kind of how is Jesus forming that in you throughout those challenges? Being able to share that throughout, like over dinner, just one of those ways. As we, it's Commitments Week for us at Solis, but regularly at community groups, we're trying to encourage one another to be praying for our friends, our family, those, the people who are dear to us, our neighbours, and just think about opportunities that we can share the gospel. We can grow in friendship with others for the sake of seeing, being able to share our faith, being able to share Jesus with others. So I think it's having that kind of gospel priority at every moment as we're gathering over dinner, as we're praying, as we're in God's word, and not just kind of gaining head knowledge, but being able to put that into practice, the walk, and thinking about so what does that mean for us as we go out? Community group, back to the next work day, Wednesday, we're back at work. How is this word going to help us to live as lights, as ambassadors for Christ? Yeah,
totally. And obviously, the more that you're growing, the better you will be on a mission. Do you agree with that, Tim? Do you think that's
yes?
Ultimately, that's the point of it, isn't it? Is that the closer we are to God and the more that we're growing, the better that we are to be able to be ambassadors and lights for Christ, as you're saying. Yeah. Yep. So how do you think the discipleship and mission thing works as well? You have a different perspective on that?
Oh, I don't think it's different.
No, it's probably not. This is probably not different.
I disagree.
It's like that Bible study question in your own words.
Yes. Yeah. What does verse 6 say?
And I will shout out Fee, who's been on this podcast before. She's in a community group. She gets so annoyed at that. She's like, well, the Bible says that that's what it should say. So why do we need to put it in our own words? Just read the Bible.
Yes, fair call. Yes, I think mission and discipleship are kind of like reciprocal forces. Mm-hmm. So they're reinforcing each other, and so you are discipling each other to grow in your own knowledge, love, and obedience to King Jesus. And part of obedience to King Jesus is to tell others about Him. And so as I grow in my knowledge and understanding of who Jesus is and who I am and who my neighbour is, then I'll be encouraged to go and share that with my neighbour, and in word and in deed, and so communicating well to them. And so they are going to reinforce each other. And again, when we come together in a small group where we can all hear each other's stories, we can hear each other's joys and challenges and the things that are going on with different people who they're hoping to share the gospel with. And this is what we did last week in this Commitments Week time, was to sort of go around the circle and say, okay, well, who is in your life that you are hoping to either continue or start a conversation with, or even further back from that, just start a conversation with, as in like, hey, my name's Tim, who are you? And and so we were sharing with different people. And so, Emily had a few people at uni that she's particularly investing in and is invited to a number of Christian group things. But also there's a particular challenge now that their course structure has changed. They're doing more research based, which means they're less in their cohort when they were all doing classes together. So these particular people that she spent time with, she's not seeing very often because they're all off of their different research centres doing their different stuff. Right. And so now the challenge is proximity of being able to continue good relationships with them and then bring them into the lunchtime groups or the prayer groups or whatever it might be at uni. For me, I shared that pretty much our hallway at home in our apartment block, pretty much every unit has turned over in the last 6 months.
Really?
And so there's a great opportunity. So I'm at that place where I just want to get to know them, as in like, what's their name? Who's in their family? Who's living on my level? to eventually be able to share a little bit more about who I am and what I believe, and sharing each other's lives a little bit more. And so, I mean, it's pretty easy to say, I'm the minister of the church across the road, which often just shuts down the conversation pretty early. But it's, you see each other enough in the lift shaft and in the talking to each other that you see each other around. You can have those little ad hoc conversations that hopefully will grow into something new. So we were sharing about all those different things. That was really lovely. And so coming together, encouraging each other, praying for each other, and then being released out to go and be salt and light in our communities, in our families, in our neighbourhoods is really key. And then the other thing is maybe not mission to non-Christians or not yet Christians, but just when we come to the larger gathering, and I think I may have said this last week as well, but I'm kind of released to go and talk to other people. So as I look around on Sunday morning and I see, there's Paul and Dane, there's Cam and there's Cameron and there's, Matt and Emily and whatever, I know I'm going to see them on Tuesday. So I don't need to talk to Cam and ask how his men's shed's going on Sunday. I'm freed up and he's freed up to talk to other people. Right. Because I will hear how he's going. I care about him. I care about his men's shed. I care about the guys that he's ministering to in that environment and the particular challenges and joys that come with that. But because of the way that we disciple each other on Tuesdays, on Sundays, I'm freed up to go and catch up with other people. And so I think there's that also coming together so you can be on friendship, on mission outwards is also really key. And so one of the things we talk about at Soul Revival is this, an outward-looking friendship, not an inward-looking friendship. So clickiness that you observe in churches and in other spaces, social groupings, is kind of like an inward-facing group. So I'm talking with my friends here, and we've all got an inward-facing, sometimes even literally an inward-facing posture, and other people find it hard to break into those. And you're not interested in the other people who are milling around your space. An outward-facing friendship is, I can stand near the door next to Lauren, who I'm, best friends with, but as a new person walks in, we'll happily break that conversation in order to minister to the people walking through the door and such an, here comes so-and-so, I need to catch up with them this week. Great to talk to you, Lauren, and we can go and have those different conversations. So that is also part of that discipleship mission dynamic and how they can reinforce each other.
Yeah, definitely. Taking the question about missional a little bit further, and this may recall to the ongoing discussion that you guys had after we even planned this series, there's the idea of inviting people to community groups or to Bible studies, and some people call them missional communities, or at least going out as a group to be on mission somewhere in your community. I'd just like to get your perspectives on that, and because they were slightly differing between the two of you, I think, and not in a really disagreeable way, but just really to try and capture the highlights of that conversation. Because first of all, I wasn't there for part of it, but second of all, I'd be interested in maybe where those differences lie, but it wasn't really a conflict of differences. It was like, just thinking about it different ways. Do you want to go first, Joey? Like, what are your thoughts on that to begin with?
Well, I think it's something that maybe particularly for me, coming in as the pastor overseeing community groups, which has been a recent thing, we're continually working through, and it's actually been really cool to be able to talk to Tim and Stu about these things, and we're wrestling with some of the strategy stuff, some of the practice stuff, and it's been really fruitful actually for us to do that. I guess coming from that conversation, we perhaps in terms of some of the practice stuff for Ride, just to get concrete about it, we were chatting about finding the opportunities, the moments, whether it's, you might say, right moments for different people to join these community groups. You get people coming to church ranging from people who follow Jesus, they love Jesus, and they want to kind of join church, be on mission with you. For us, be on mission to Meadowbank and Ride, all the way from them to newcomers, young Christians, or people who don't yet follow Jesus. They're exploring the Christian faith. And a lot of it has been thinking about, what is most helpful for these people.
A particular
as
demographic.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. As they grow as disciples of Jesus, as they come to know who Jesus is, as kind of God unblinds people and people are converted, what is most helpful for all of these people who come to church? And I guess to your question, perhaps those who we've been wrestling with, like those people who come to our church plant in Ryde, who perhaps are really keen to come on Saturdays. They are keen to also, find a bit of friendship, community, even interested in reading about the Bible, but they don't yet follow Jesus. What would be helpful for them? And I think we've been kind of a bit more open-handed about that at this point in time for Ryde. We don't want to say you can't come to a community group because you don't follow Jesus. We're not like that at all. And at the same time, there have been some people who we've kind of said, you're welcome to come to community group, and it's on Tuesday nights. Come join us for dinner, and we let them know, this is what we do. We actually spend some time praying. We spend some time in God's word. We want to be able to show them that this is what Christians do, throughout the way. And at the same time, for some people, we might go, we also have this thing called Colours of Life that we do at Soul Revival. It's a great way for you to just get the basic foundations, the understanding of who Jesus is, what the gospel is, what the Bible says about God's plan to bring people into his family through Jesus. And perhaps you want to take, 2 weeks just to, go through Colours of Life, spend some time in the Bible doing that so that you get a understanding of that first. And that's one way we go, well, why don't you take a time to do that as well? Because sometimes people, if they come to community group and we're doing a passage that's, from the sermon, it can be a little tricky for them to just kind of, parachute into that. So we invite them to do that.
It could be intimidating, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could be intimidating. Yeah. So that's one way where we go, well, come to community group if you like, but also here's another avenue for us to, dig deeper into who Jesus is for you. And that might be helpful. Yeah. Having said that, there've been people who are non-believers. They come to community group. Ting and Vera, who've actually been here for ages, they were invited quite early on and they've really enjoyed that. That's been a way for them as they explore Christianity for us to love them. And even for Vera, the kids' story time, Bible story time, they leave actually after dinner pretty much, but they always stick around for that.
Yeah,
and that's been a really cool way for us to be able to share the gospel.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Tim, you got your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, as I've questioned over the last couple of episodes, just and not because I've got a different opinion. I'm just kind of like playing around with ideas and just thinking, is mission discipleship is one? What's the purpose, I suppose? And if you can answer that purpose question, what is going on here? I still think that a small group, unless you go for a missional communities perspective, which is a whole different thing. So we'll park that to the side in a second. We can talk about that. But I think the way that most small groups work is it's for intentional discipleship, like going deeper with those who are committed. And we talked last week about how that sort of comes out of a little bit of the saddleback, seeker-sensitive kind of stuff, that you've got big stuff in the crowd on the weekend, small groups for the committed on the midweek. And I think that's okay. Like, I think that kind of works. I think where I'm just kind of wondering is, well, is it appropriate to invite someone who is not yet a Christian into that small group? And I think I was saying, well, sure, why not? Like, why not come along? And to go back to the football example, I think, so as someone who hasn't grown up interested in football and knowing football, I went to a couple of A-League games and to our good friend Michael Greaves, and he shared, like, we sat with him in the stands, and I got to ask, like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? And so that was kind of like going to the weekend gathering, right? Like, we're watching a game where the sport is happening in front of us, and I'm there with a friend who's like, I don't understand this, but can you explain what's going on here, what's going on here? And so it's kind of like a non-Christian coming to church and going, what are we doing now? Oh, we have to stand up again. Why are we standing up again?
Yeah.
Oh, right. And then we sit. Oh, everyone's closed their eyes. I guess, do I close my eyes as well? Okay. And if you sit next to someone who is a safe person who's invited you along, because you're interested, then that's a good space to be in. Would it be appropriate for that person to go to a training session with the players and the coach? And in one sense, as an observer, I said, well, I guess so. Like, why not? Like, come along. And by sitting and watching and asking a couple of questions, you will probably get a more intimate version of understanding of, oh, that was your strategy. And when I listen to the coach tell the players, like, do this, now we're going to reformulate, we're going to put more at the back and less at the front, or those kinds of things, you get to play and go, oh, I see, I've got a deeper awareness now of what's going on. I'm still not a fan, I might not be committed, but I'm understanding the game better. Where I think that would be unhelpful, and this is where things like colours of life come in, is if the person kept saying, sorry, can I just jump in and sorry, coach, can I just ask another question? Like, I've got all these questions. Because actually the training session is for the players to do training. And so it would be helpful for you as an observer to watch and go see what's going on, but not the place to do a 101 course in football. But if the coach was willing, then there might be a session that you could go, hey, for all those people who don't know about football, let's come and do a 101 on football, which is a different thing again. And so in the small group world, I'm playing around with these ideas. I'm just thinking, I wonder if coming to a small group as a non-Christian is, come along, like, keep checking out, ask the occasional questions. We'll kind of slow down a little bit. Awareness that you're in the room. Like, I'm not going to ignore you. We're going to run the group knowing that you're in the room. But also, because you're not a Christian and you still need to go right back to basics and understand the 101 version, let's spend some time with you and maybe a couple of others in doing the colours of life or introducing God or one of those kind of courses, to strip it right back and to build from foundation up what it actually means to be a Christian. Like, who is this Jesus fellow? I don't know, how do I read the Bible? All those kind of things, which for where the majority of the small group is at, is not what they're going to find most beneficial for a small group time. Anyway, I'm playing around with those ideas. I haven't fully convinced myself yet, but I think that they're kind of, as you think about, where does a non-Christian come to? I think what I was reacting against is the idea that we wouldn't invite a non-Christian to small group. Of course we invite them to small group. Help them to see more of Jesus and more of Christian life together. But there are also going to be times where you want to pull them aside for something that is very intentionally where they're at.
It's almost like a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, it might be,
yeah. Because I think I've only been in a Bible study or community group with maybe twice a non-Christian person's come. But then there is a lot of, what's happening here? And I remember the person, I would often explain, when we say this, it means this. She would go, oh, thank you, I appreciate you explaining that to me. But then I also get worried about over-explaining, and they're like, I know, you don't want to do, I know about that. So it is a fine balance, I suppose. That's what you said.
That's right, and it's going to require patience on all parts, and that's part of being in community, right? It's the new person needs to know, I'm not going to get all my questions answered right here. Just like me going to a training session with Sydney FC, and it's like, sorry, can everyone just slow down and explain offside to me? That's not going to be...
I'm loving the football analogy.
Yes, it's not going to be a helpful thing for what is actually intended to go on here. But if every now and then they said, all right, we're going to practice this and we're going to practice, chasing an opponent and not getting offside. And if the coach turns around and goes, remember, offside is when this happens. Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So it's required a little bit of patience from the coach and the players to explain to a noob, one of the most basic rules of football. And it's also required a little bit of patience from me as a noob, knowing that this is not for me, and I'm not going to understand everything. Some of it's going to go over my head, and that's okay. And so I think in the community group is going to be about the same. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting one to talk about. You mentioned missional communities.
Yes.
Slightly different thing. I just Googled it
Great.
for fun. The AI overview that Google gives me says missional communities are groups of Christian disciples who share life and ministry together, focusing on a common mission to a specific neighborhood or network, aiming to make disciples of Jesus and live out their faith in tangible ways. I'm interested to see, Tim, you said it's slightly different. Why do you think that different to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, so my understanding of missional communities, and that seemed to be reflected there, is rather than coming together to focus on discipleship and growing as disciples of Jesus through Bible study and prayer and those kinds of things, it's kind of flipped it and said, no, the purpose of coming together is intentionally outward.
Yes.
And so there's just a difference of focus, I suppose you would say. And so what is... so it might be like instead of coming together at the Terry's house to have dinner, we might all go up to a local restaurant or a pub or a band night and have dinner together with an outward looking, inviting others. And so I could say to people in my apartment block, hey, there's an open mic night down at so and so. Some of my friends are going. Would you be interested in coming along with us? And the idea is you sort of these non-church relationships you have, you're inviting them to a neutral place where you and your other Christian friends just happen to be hanging out. Like you've kind of intentionally selected something that would be beneficial. So each of us can bring a non-church friend. We all get to enjoy the open mic night together. And you build slowly these relationships over time. And so I say to my neighbour, meet, Paul and Day, and meet Emily and meet Cameron. They go, oh yeah, good to meet you guys. And they chat and they get in common. They feel really familiar. And the long-term, sort of low-key relational discipleship, I suppose you would say, that in this is when I talk to my neighbour about, hey, I'm going to church this week on Sunday morning. Some of the guys from open mic night will be there. It seemed you and Cam really had a lot in common. I know he's going to be there. He's going to be behind the coffee machine. Do you want to come along? I think that's kind of the aim. So the purpose of getting together midweek as your small group is to be in neutral places with an open invite to your non-Christian friends to start to build the relational capacity within that group so that the invitation to the actual word-based event of the church service or whatever it is easier. Like you've greased the wheels of relationship to order to get them there. So that's why that's sort of a different category, because the purpose of getting together is not let's read the Bible together and go deep here and understand who we are as disciples of Jesus. It's let's get together so that we can have this outward looking friendship. So it's a very different strategy. And I mean, doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just it's a completely different focus.
It kind of makes me think of how the Ride Gathering started. It wasn't intentional to be missional, was it? It was almost we called it a connected community, but it was an intentional, probably with more of a discipleship focus to begin with, and to test the ideas and see is it worth planning a soul revival gathering in Ride and working that out together. Do you want to speak to that more, Joey? Because you came on board a little bit later, because we said it started in Grace and Michelle's lounge room.
That's right.
And then grew, and now you've got two groups.
Yeah.
You've got your own gathering location, but now you have two community groups as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, actually, it was interesting. I think actually when they began, if I remember correctly, is that they had a heart for, I think it was almost a bit more missional.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, which is fascinating. They had a lot of friends who were either de-churched or that they just had friends that they want to be able to invite to
really right.
Into their home to have a chat about the Bible. And I mean, it was also interesting, like in God's timing, like they began physically, but then COVID happened and it kind of all went online, which caused all sorts of havoc, but also opportunities. And actually, in God's grace, that Bible study grew. Two people were converted during that time.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, Iris and Charlie.
Yeah.
And so some wonderful things happened there. But it's interesting. I think for them, they began almost as this kind of group, this little missional kind of group. But that was the beginnings of kind of that group, and then where our church plant came from.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost that missional community idea that Tim's talking about was it's a existing church trying to reach out more to the community, whereas Grace and Michelle had a missional desire to bring people back into it, but then it turned into almost like a discipleship and mission thing together so they could plant a church out of it. So, yeah. It's fascinating.
I mean, it was also funny. I mean, in some ways they had begun that, and there was the only connection. There was connection with Grace and Michelle as they were coming over all the way from Ryde to Kirrawee during that time.
Yeah, they were.
So they were part of that group, but then they had their own, I guess, little community that they were. I think it was almost like for Grace, this kind of experiment for her as she was trying to figure out how to share the gospel with many of her friends.
Interesting.
And that's how it began. Yeah.
Well, I think it's what we're just talking about there is a perfect example of, again, having practice as the flexible part of your ministry, because if you've got the strong theology and strategy, we were able to figure out a flexible practice that worked for what Michelle and Grace wanted to do. And then as a result, it resulted in a church plant coming out of it, which is amazing. And then you're gradually growing there too under God's grace as well.
Yeah. I think God uses that, and they kind of evolve over time. And I mean, and that was really helpful what Tim was saying. Like there's, I think even this missional community, it's about emphases, right? It's about focus. Yeah. And they kind of, these groups exist along a spectrum. There's like, just if you simplify it, it's discipleship, and the mission focus, like emphases. And in churches across Sydney, some have a really strong kind of almost, they'll call it a pathway, thinking about, who goes to a community group, who goes to a evangelistic course. And
so those 5 C's as well, like there's a structure as well.
That's right, yeah. And then they go into like one-to-ones, and that's a strong kind of discipleship focus for the community group, whereas other churches might have a very strong missional community aspect to it. I think many churches in their strategy and practice probably exist somewhere in between, not at the real extremes of it, but kind of somewhere, in between. But it does depend on their strategy and emphases. Yeah.
Yep. And as you say, like it's when you've got a clear theology and strategy, why and how. I always get, is that right? Yeah, I always get confused with the how and the what. If you know the why and the how of what you're doing, then the what can be flexible person to person. And so there will be situations where it is completely appropriate or right for this person to go to this option. And so I would imagine that these churches that have a clear pathway are not going to be so inflexible that if someone, you're not allowed, you have to, the pathway says, you kind of get this bad bureaucracy kind of, you've submitted form 204, you need to just submit form 205, you're going to have to come back next week now. It's like, we don't want to be that, like inflexible, but because you know your theology and your strategy, it allows you to play around with practice. And so, I've had conversations coming off community groups, going to children's ministry world again, do we, particularly regional churches, do we have to have a Sunday school? So, well, no, you have to disciple children, but that's a theology that children are members of Christ's church, disciples of Jesus, and therefore need to grow in their knowledge, love and obedience to him. Sunday school is a practice. And so you can have those conversations. So, does your church need small groups at all? It doesn't have to. It's a practice that for many churches, again, in the late 20th, early 21st, suburban West particularly, small groups have been a really good practice that have helped their theology and strategy to grow disciples of Jesus. Do we have to have them? No, of course not. You'd have to.
It's not prescriptive.
It's not prescriptive, no. And we know that because there have been Christians all throughout the world for the last 2,000 years who have not had small groups. So clearly it's not a necessary practice. But as long as it is good and helpful and it flows clearly from your theology and your strategy, then as a practice, great, let's go for it. Let's do it well.
Yeah. And I think what we talked about, whether it's what we did at Grace and Michelle's or like how we run community groups now, is the perfect picture of that, is that they've all been different, but they're all, because they're under that theology and strategy, they're still working towards the same thing in a sense. But that gives the flexibility of people to be able to come to it as well.
For sure.
So, yeah, I think that's a great way to really sum it up.
Excellent.
Thank you guys. Thank you for listening to me pass through my football thoughts as well. I appreciate it. But this has been a really fun mini-series to put together with you guys. So thank you very much for your contributions. It's been wonderful. If you have any other questions, email me, joel@shockabsorber.com.au, or you can drop a comment in our YouTube channel, and we'd love to see that, because it always is great for other people getting to know us and hearing what we have to say. And as always, we really appreciate you listening or watching, whether it's on YouTube or on your favourite podcast app. We thank you very much. And I'll finish with a final thank you for Tim and Joey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel.
And as always, we finish with a one way.
One line.